Do we
Yeah.
have a,
You do have a quorum.
we do, thank you.
Yeah.
First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Move we accept them as presented.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the previous meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
They hear you. You
Great.
push a button to be heard.
Same thing for the fiscal actions report. We all have a copy of that. Any additions or corrections? I have a motion.
Move it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the fiscal action report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Project review actions report, just the resolution. Joe? Are we missing Joe? We're missing Joe Stanek. I'll skip him for now then.
Where'd he go?
I see his video is empty. The harmful algae bloom is the next thing on the agenda. I guess Dave, you will probably be speaking to that, correct?
Yeah, so everybody is aware of the recent harmful algae bloom on Lake George, which is exceptionally unfortunate. Something we've been talking about as a commission for many years. Kind of the shot heard around the world was a couple years ago in Skaneateles Lake, which we consider kind of our sister lake. Very high water quality, similar water depths, a little shallower. And they got harmful algae blooms for the first time. And so they've been working on studying it out there. The Jefferson Project actually moved some equipment out there to help identify what the issue was. And then a couple of weekends ago, the Lake George Association received a call saying there appeared to be some algae scum on the surface. Kristen Wild went out on Saturday and identified it and took a sample and sent it down to DEC. And DEC confirmed that that was indeed a harmful algae bloom. No one really knew the extent at the time. The following Monday, Dr. Rebecca Gournay and another DEC staff came up. I was there, Walt was there, a few other folks, and they cleared it on site and said, yes, this is kind of what we have and what we're looking at. So to make sure that you guys have the best information, I asked Dr. Gournay to come up and talk to you guys a little bit about the issue, what it means, and kind of what we know so far. So I do see that Dr. Gournay is somewhere here. I saw her on the line. She's muted. I don't see her video, but Rebecca is here. And I guess with that, Rebecca, I can kind of turn it over to you, and we appreciate you coming up and talking with us.
Yes, thank you for the invitation, Dave. I don't have a camera, but apparently there's one waiting for me at the office that I will be fetching tomorrow. So this is my last on camera today. But I am joined by my superiors, Karen Steinberg, who's the chief of the Lake Monitoring and Assessment Section, and Jackie Lendrum, who is the Bureau Director for the Bureau of Water Assessment and Management. And Jackie is, I will turn the mic to you to address the group.
Sure, thanks, Rebecca. We also have, I believe, some partners from our Region 5 office on the line. I don't know if you can see them. I don't see them on my screen, but hopefully they're as well, that have been an important part of this response. As Dave said, we did confirm the presence of a harmful algal bloom during that November 7th, 8th, 9th time period. We did have staff on site. We did collect samples. We also, the following Sunday, November 15th, also received photographic evidence that we confirmed as a harmful algal bloom. So although it did diminish after that initial still very warm period, there did seem to be very small residual sorts of blooms the following weekend. Also, as part of that process, we received photographic evidence of a bloom roughly 2 weeks ahead of that. So we did add a confirmed bloom from October 23rd, which is also interesting to know that it's not likely the first bloom that's ever existed, but it certainly was more prevalent than maybe we've seen before or have had people submit reports of before. As I said, we did have staff on site. They did a variety of tests. There are a number of other folks running a variety of tests, but we did collect samples and send them to 3 different labs for harmful algal bloom toxin analysis. We were not able to detect toxins above what we call the detection limit. So every scientific method can only measure to a certain level. And to say that something is absolute zero is really impossible. So although we didn't detect toxins, we're being very careful about the messaging there because toxin detection should not, or not being able to detect toxins should not give people false comfort that it's therefore safe to drink untreated lake water or safe to let your dog go swim, or if you're swimming or boating this time of year. So we continue to be really careful to message to folks to know what a harmful algal bloom looks like, even those small shoreline scums, know what they look like, keep your animals out of them, take a picture, send it to us so that we can track what's happening. Happy to answer any questions you have on that. The other type of analysis that we did was we were interested to know if the lake had turned over, if it was still set up. We suspected that it had turned over shortly before these blooms popped up, and we did confirm that with some just basic temperature profiling. We did in the same time frame, for what it's worth, have harmful algal bloom also confirmed on Mirror Lake in Lake Placid. For those of you that saw those headlines as well, that was confirmed as a harmful algal bloom as well. As far as what happens next, all of this information goes into our archives. We're again on the lookout now, but seems that it's pretty cold right now, so hopefully we won't see anything else. And we are in the process of organizing a bigger meeting, a stakeholder meeting with folks to talk about these results and also to talk about next steps for those folks. And certainly this group will be included in that invitation. So with that, if you have questions, we're happy to answer them. I'm just looking at my notes here if there's anything that I missed as far as the science, but happy to answer any questions you have.
Do we have any nutrient level measurements in that area where the algal bloom occurred?
So we did not analyze for nutrients. We wouldn't routinely do that this time of year. It's sort of outside of our monitoring season, if you will. But I believe other groups have taken different measurements for nutrients.
Jackie, Bill Mason here. I run a small community or small water system in Cloverdale, which is across the bay from where this algae bloom was. And I've been concerned ever since I got word of it that I'm providing water. It's treated. It's treated very extensively, but it's my understanding that you can't remove the toxins, that there's no treatment that would do that. Is there a system where I can go on a list that we would get a very quick notification? I was dealing with the Department of Health and calling my local Department of Health to talk about this, and he kind of made me feel at ease, but I'm going to say only kind of. I never really felt confident. And we drink the water, we bathe in it and so on. And I wonder, is there a way to I don't know, have kind of an email notification to get me more.
Sure, so let me talk about what our statewide HAB notification system is. Something called NYHABS, N-Y-H-A-B-S. You can Google it, it'll show up. And what that is that we confirm HABs and post them to NYHABS from roughly Memorial Day through the end of October, so October 30th. And so what that does is we get those reports every day, and within a relatively short amount of time, less than a day, we're able to confirm them and post them to that NIHAB system. And so what that does is it allows folks, members of the public or any number of folks, a place to go to see where people are seeing harmful algal blooms, and to know that we're confirming that, yes, in fact, that's not plain green algae, that's a harmful algal bloom. Now, in addition to that, the health department is notified in real time about a harmful algal bloom, and they do have notification procedures. So that's where that conversation, what you just said, that you were talking to the local health department folks, that is the best place for you to get that information aside from NIHABs, because again, they have their own infrastructure for how they communicate with local water purveyors. Again, someone referenced Skaneateles Lake a few minutes ago. The local health department there has a way of notifying folks if there's what the Department of Health deems a public health risk due to the harmful algal bloom. So that's the best place for you to go to establish what that protocol would be. And then they would also be able to give you proper technical input as to how your treatment system is operating, and whether that, even with HABs coming in the intake pipe, whether that would be protecting your water consumers. I will just offer that scientifically, there are ways to treat water with cyanobacteria in them that will result in safe drinking water. And those are not necessarily super fancy, expensive systems. But again, the health department is the best place for you to get technical information on that. Beyond NIHABs, so for this particular HAB, as I said, roughly around November 1st, we take NIHABs down to do maintenance on it. That has always been a perfectly fine thing to do, because again, we're focused mainly on the recreational season. This one happened outside of that season, so, or outside of that time frame. We already had the NIHABs system down for maintenance. So what we did was, as the Lake George Alliance and others were providing us with that information, we used a stakeholder list of emails that we had that did include this group to push emails out with this information. So that is not a perfect system by any means, but that was what we had. So that's how we continue to push that information out. We are happy to continue to update that list as just sort of a backup system, but NIHABs is a much better way for you to get information in real time. Hopefully that answered your question. It was a long answer to a short question.
It's a long answer. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Go
Is
ahead.
Jackie still around, or Dr. Gorney?
Yep, we're here.
Oh, good. I'd like to go back to what Commissioner Cook asked you about the nutrient level, and the fact that it's been outside the recreation season, and basically it sounded to me like things were all put to bed for the season, and that you said that there were other groups that were on that quest to find out just what was there a perfect storm brewing in the water to cause this HAB. But it just seems to me that you're the DEC, and if we can't, and you have all the scientists and all the, you know, all the stuff that should be there to help us go in this direction to find out just what the nutrient level was. You did say that you did talk about the temperature profile of the lake, that it had turned over, but maybe you could help out
Let me explain. Yeah, let me explain.
I would like to know why, without being too forward, why the nutrient level wasn't first and foremost in your on your agenda. Like, wow, this is the first time that this has been reported, that this has happened on Lake George. And let's see, what was the E. coli in there? What were the phosphates? What was the phosphorus level? What were the nitrates? What was the dissolved oxygen level? I mean, I would think that you would have wanted to know that and gotten right on it.
Sure. So let me tell you how we do those types of studies. Those aren't the types of studies that you do, you run out and do an emergency situation. Because the data, so how do we establish a nutrient level for a lake? We would sample it over the course of ideally multiple years, multiple times in the year, et cetera. Something that you mentioned, E. coli, again, our water quality standards look at averages of multiple samples over the course of many months, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't, the measurement of the phosphorus level in Lake George, which I expect has not changed significantly in recent times, is something that would be done, and we do that with our partners in the LGA, as well as our own monitoring programs, both CSLAP and LCI. But it wouldn't, if I were to just go out and grab a sample in Lake George today, I wouldn't expect it to have much of anything in it, because I do think that Lake George continues to be clean, a relatively clean lake. But also, I don't have anything to compare it to, because we take those measurements during the sort of spring till fall season. And so as we're watching what's happening in Lake George, we want to know what's happening in Lake George over the last 5 to 10 years. There wouldn't have been, it wouldn't be, if we're going to monitor Lake George in the wintertime, we would again be out there 3 or 4 times over the course of the winter season in order to get that type of information. We don't routinely monitor lakes in the wintertime. Logistically, it's hard. But again, what we find, or what we know, is that the productivity of the lake, the amount of algae or cyanobacteria that's growing in the lake, is largely dependent on those average, the average nutrient levels, is I guess how I'm going to say that. So I suspect that you're not going to see that those nutrient levels, those average nutrient levels, which is again how DEC monitors these things, have changed in Lake George. We have hypotheses as to what was happening during this particular bloom, and we're going to look at that and think about that and do some testing there. But it's largely, we don't look at those, I'm going to use the term diurnal, but where you might see a storm event with a 3-hour window with a nutrient push. That type of science isn't how we're seeing lakes respond and bloom, but certainly there are hypotheses about that. So I don't know if that answered your question. What we were focused on was understanding where the lake was at from a stratification perspective. Again, was it turned over? Looking at weather and temperatures, both in the lake and air temperatures, also at the stillness of what was happening on the lake at that time. It was a particularly calm period of a couple of days. So even though most of us recognized that it was very warm, it was nice to be out, it's really that calmness that seems to maybe have been the trigger. And it's not unlike the calmness that we saw in Skaneateles Lake in the fall of 2017. So that's more of what we're thinking was going on and why that had the chance to set up. But lots more work to do and lots more things to think about there.
Well, thanks, Jack. I'll be looking forward to hearing about your hypotheses and if you're going to do any kind of scientific experiments to prove or disprove what you feel went down. But just thinking about it, we know that cyanobacteria has been there for a long time. And, I did some research. Where in heck did it come from? Well, it's always been around. But for it to have grown and multiplied and made the colonies, and then for it to have appeared, it's feeding on something. And it just upsets me to a point where nobody wants to bring up the word nutrients from septic systems that aren't working properly on the lake. And the fund has done a study, and it's like almost 2/3 of them are not working like they should be, that maybe they are failing. And to me, it just would not have been a very difficult thing to have taken some kinds of readings to find out if there is indeed an overload of nutrients in some of those areas. Now, I'm very aware that there are underground currents in the lake and things. That has been a Jefferson project find, and that things can move from one part of the lake to the other very quickly without anybody knowing. But I just will be interested in hearing about your hypotheses and what you found. Thank you. I appreciate your response.
Carol?
Thanks, Bruce. To that point, Kathy, I think you're right on. As I said before, I think in this meeting, I happen to be probably the only person in this room, so to speak, that has actually done the nutrient work on this particular algae. And I also measured changes with light and temperature. I can spike the nutrients and get an increase in growth with these guys. So it's important to realize that nutrients play an important part in this. It's also important to understand that these type of algae had these internal storage capacity for holding on to nutrients for such a time that they will bloom. So these are all factors that are part of this. So I agree. The nutrients
and
matter.
I'll jump in here as well. I don't disagree. I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
We'll talk about this. The battle against nutrients is, something that our group, the DEC, is, that's what we do. If you want to make sure your water is clean, make sure you keep as many nutrients out as possible. 100% agree. And there's what we call, I forget who developed this term, no regrets actions. Anything that you can do to keep nutrients out of Lake George will benefit the lake, not just from a harmful algal bloom perspective, but regular green algae or clarity or any of those things that are going to make your lake or keep your lake the beautiful water body that it is. So again, to the original question as to why we didn't grab a sample that day, it's a scientifically, it didn't tell me anything. It didn't help me test a hypothesis with that sample, I think was what I was maybe not saying well. But understanding if there is a rise in nutrients, which you have a lot of folks studying and measuring on your lake, and we'll talk more about that. If there is an increase in nutrients building up in your lake, and primarily we talk about phosphorus, then yes, you need to battle that back down because that will keep your lake clean. But it's going to be more complicated than that for Lake George, just like it is for Skinny Atlas Lake, because they are very clean systems. And clean, when I say clean, I mean low nutrients. So I would love to be able to tell you if you can catch your nutrients to X level, you will never have a harmful algal bloom, but the harmful algal blooms are proving to be more challenging that, and finding them in these low nutrient systems is something that we are going to be battling. We're studying scientifically, lots of research is going into it. But again, no regrets actions. I can't comment on the Jefferson project or the fund septic thing, but if you have a failing septic, fix it. That will help your water quality. I think that's just a known fact. So I just want to make sure that no one misunderstood that 100% DEC is on board for the battle against nutrients in our waterways.
I'd just like to add something on the question of failed septic systems. The bay where the HAB was first seen on the 7th and was still there on the 15th of November is a very still, quiet cove. And adjacent to that cove, you have 2 failed septic systems. It's a wetland that never should have been developed, and the town of Queensbury right now is contemplating on increased development of that particular area. So I just wanted to add that this is a very, well, I should say, a very difficult area where the bloom occurred because of the shallowness, because of the stillness, because of failed septic systems that surround this particular cove.
Okay. Have any more you want to say on this, Dave?
It sounds well covered to me, Mr. Chairman. I think we'd like an open dialogue with the DEC and local partners who continue to study this throughout the winter. It's going to be an evolving conversation. Hopefully we can have people back in 2 to 3 months just to see what the spring and summer sampling plans are. But I think that so many have been responding immediately to this issue, and you know, as good a place as we can be, I think we are right now.
Oh, it go up.
And I'd also, Dave, just in response to that, I hope that when you do receive the invite for this upcoming stakeholder meeting that the DEC will be hosting, we do hope that the Park Commission, that you folks will be represented on that, and that you can bring, you know, ideas and thoughts for what, how we're doing as far as the HABS action plan. We're going to take a real hard look at what we said we were going to do a couple of years ago, how far into that we've gotten, and how to continue implementing that, or to revise that and implement you know, in a different way. It's really important in any lake situation that the DEC take direction from the local community and the local stakeholders. If you all want to go, you know, left and work on implementing whatever those practices are, we want to support you in that. If, you know, again, scientifically that makes sense, and not try to convince you to go right in a different direction. So these upcoming, the upcoming stakeholder meeting will be really important so that we can hear from the local stakeholders, understand what you want, and support you the best that we can.
Well, thanks, Jackie. I think we're going to be very engaged with that. We were very engaged with the HAB plan with DEC, and yeah, we're all working towards the same goal. And you know, we expect not only staff but some commissioners to be involved in that as well. So thank you.
Had the interviews without telling the board of supervisors. Yeah, so now.
Thank you, Dave. If anyone doesn't have anything to add to this, I'll continue to our next item. Matter of fact, I will.
Bruce, it looks like we've got a gentleman named Ed who has his hand raised. He'd like to speak possibly about the HABs.
Okay.
Ed, go ahead.
If I may, thank you very much, and excuse me if I don't speak clearly with this. I'm new to computers. About, well, quite frankly, back in August, I raised the specter of this problem, the harmful algae blooms locally, with Mayor Blaze and Chris Novisky and others in the community. I feared that the growth in the goose population on the lake might contribute to this problem. That was back in August. Subsequently, I did a little bit of research, and quite frankly, when the HABs were discovered this past November, I looked at it a little bit more. I do think it's an issue that needs to be investigated. I gave Justin, I shared with Justin a couple of websites and a video, particularly as it pertains to a lake out in Ohio, Buckeye Lake. It's a 7-mile long lake that experienced a great deal of problems with harmful algae blooms, which were ultimately attributed to an explosion in the goose population. I noticed it here in Lake George, primarily down at the Dog Beach area, which has recently undergone some renovations. But if you kayak or canoe along the lake, you'll find that there are plenty of areas with large populations of geese. Quite frankly, we just drove up to Hague not too long ago, and the public beach at Hague had a large population of geese. The geese manure is a source of nutrients, phosphates and phosphorus, that contribute to the growth of algae blooms, among other problems or contaminations, including E. coli. So it's an area that ought to be investigated, I think, anyway, or at least it shouldn't be immediately dismissed. There are large populations on some areas of the lake, not just in the public beach areas, but on some of the larger private properties where they appear to have gathered. It can be dealt with. It's a problem that can be dealt with biologicals that would otherwise not be harmful to the environment, and other methods that could be utilized to deal with the problem. But the growth of the goose population on Lake George is something, I think, that if you're concerned about harmful algae blooms, ought to be investigated. And perhaps if it's continuing, it ought to be remediated. As far as continuing is concerned, I know this is outside of the Lake George area, but just take a ride up Penfield Pond out by Ironville, and it's a city of geese. I can't imagine what that pond is like today as far as harmful algae blooms are concerned. But the geese, if they're not presently a serious problem, can become a serious problem, and their growth ought to be monitored. Thank you.
Justin, you see anybody else who wants to speak?
Let's see. Doesn't appear that way.
Okay, in that case,
Oh, I spoke too soon. It looks like we have a
Mr.
call.
Commissioner.
Sounds
Yeah,
like
it's Steve Vermont.
Yeah.
Pursuant to that last gentleman's call, we do have a permit to remove the geese through DEC on a federal level, and we do open that up in the spring, I believe. I don't have the paper in front of me. I believe it's April 1st to August 1st. After that, we're not allowed to eradicate the geese. So we are aware of the geese problem up there, and we do work to move them out. But after that time, we cannot do anything to eradicate them. All we can do is try and chase them away. Thank you.
thank you, Steve. See anyone else, Justin?
I don't. Oh, looks like Ed would like to follow up. Go ahead, Ed.
Yes, thank you. If I may just respond to that last comment, there are biologicals that might be utilized that would deter the geese from returning to different areas of the lake. I understand, and again, I did Justin an email from one agency that deals with that problem, particularly in Ohio at the Buckeye Lake area, so that it's not a matter of hunting or chasing them away or anything like that. There are ways to deter them from returning that would not otherwise impair or damage the environment, and would not, quite frankly, from what I understand, and again, my knowledge is very limited, would not cause harm to other waterfowl. So it's something that should be, I think, thought about and put in your back pocket or something like that. I appreciate that nobody wants to jump on an issue like this right away without a little bit more study. Again, it was apparent to me back in August. All of a sudden, the HABs materialized as I feared that they might. And so now I do think that more than just an alarm, it's something that ought to be attended to in some way. Again, thank you.
Justin, may I speak?
Go for it, Kathy.
With all due respect, Ed, this geese problem has been around for well over 20 years, and I've had firsthand dealing with it. And yes, you can get rid of the geese, but you have to go to extreme measures. And I would like you to know that we probably had a flock of 60 to 7, maybe to 80 that came back year after year on our property at Hewlett's Landing. And finally, we went to the extreme measure and we got a permit from the DEC, and we shot them. And all you have to do is shoot one, and they will never come back. And we did everything from coddling the eggs and putting oil on them to taking them from their nests. And my mother at the time was in her 80s. Every day she would go down on the property and gather a 5-gallon bucket full of duck droppings. This went on and on. We had blanks to shoot. This sounded like a hunting rifle. Nah, that didn't do one thing. They got used to that sound very quickly. So the duck issue is something that you can't, or the geese issue is something that you can get rid of, but you have to take steps to do it. And it's not a novel issue. It has really been around for a long, long time. Fortunately, I don't see them anymore. They've been gone for almost 10 years. But I do appreciate your comments, Ed.
Thanks, Bruce. Just a quick question back to Jackie. We priced out some treatment, the Assembly Point Water Quality Coalition, using reverse osmosis. And you mentioned that there were cheaper ways to do it, because that was coming in at around 15,000. So is there?
So I would, again, send you to the health department. They're the best resource to let you know what type of water treatment system you should have. Again, not just from a harmful algal bloom perspective, there's lots of other things, other reasons why you shouldn't drink untreated lake water. So I wouldn't be doing you a service answering that question. It's best that you talk to them.
Thank you.
Okay, Justin, you see anyone else on this topic?
Yep, Ed would like to follow up. Go ahead, Ed.
Hi, Kathy, I just want to respond. I'm sorry. Justin, I did send you an email. I don't know if you have the ability to forward that to Kathy or not. But if you can, would you please, Kathy, it'll provide you some additional information. It'll also provide you with some information with regard to treatment that would not involve the gunfire or the dogs chasing geese or oddling the eggs or anything like that. And again, it's considered to be a safe biological treatment. It's something you spray on your lawns and basically will keep the geese from returning. And again, I mentioned it. I don't know that you have the problems anymore. You say you've gotten rid of them, and that's great. But all you have to do is kayak, canoe, or boat around the lake, and you'll see that there are plenty of areas today where there are large populations of geese. And I do suspect that the manure does contribute to phosphate and the phosphorus levels in the lake.
Absolutely, it sure does. And the only thing about putting something that's not harmful, as soon as it rains, it dissipates or washes off, and then you have to reapply it. And it's seriously, I know nobody wants to do anything drastic, especially to animals, but
like his brother,
it's either them or us. So there you go, Ed. But thank you. I will look forward to reading your what you have to give me.
Thank you.
Looks like we've got one more comment from Stephanie. Hold on just a step. Hold on. You're muted.
Okay.
There we go.
Jackie, this year is special because of COVID and the excess use on the lake. But with global warming and temperatures rising, and the DEC is monitoring things at the end of October. I don't know when you put them in the spring, but considering the year-round use of the lake is constantly increasing, I was just wondering if there is any thought about extending the period that you have monitors in the water and starting them sooner in the spring. I was just curious about that. Year-round living on the lake has increased so much, and the use, and it just seems to me that you're pulling out too soon.
Okay, so let me just be clear. We don't have fancy buoys on Lake George during the summer. we don't have that kind of a monitoring system. What the programs that we have in place, the citizen monitors that we have in place are through what we call our Citizen Statewide Lake Assessment Program, CSLAP. And the Lake George Alliance is that partner for us in this area of the lake.
Sorry,
so,
just to correct you, that's the Lake George Association. Not
I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm sorry. So LGA, I'm gonna do it that way, is our partner there. And what we do with that group is make sure they have extensive training in HABs so that they know what they're looking for as they monitor the lake, and then they collect water samples for us in certain, in accordance with our protocols. I'll just leave it at that. So as far as monitoring for harmful algal blooms, that doesn't stop when we pull our NIHAB system down. It's just it's a web-based system that needs maintenance. The ability for us to take information still exists. You can still input it. Is there thought on whether that season is too short or not? Sure, absolutely. We're going to look at that. But I just want to be clear that I don't have, again, smart buoys or whatever you folks are familiar with because of the other important work that's happening on the lake. That's not something that we have in any lake at any sort of mass across the state. So, but those CSLAP volunteers and the private citizens that live on the lake, one of the things that has struck me in the last couple of weeks is that the folks that live on Lake George don't know what a harmful algal bloom looks like. Whereas folks on lakes across the state that have been dealing with harmful algal blooms for over a decade do know what they look like. So the pictures that we received, 2 weeks ago from, late in October, that person said, I saw this, I didn't know what it was. So there's a very important public education piece that we need all of the groups in Lake George, around Lake George, to help us to educate all of the citizens on the lake what a harmful algal bloom looks like, not just so that they can report it to us and we can keep track of it, but so that we can get that data and push it out to the folks that use the lake so that they recognize when there's a risk. No one wants to report that their dog went swimming in a harmful algal bloom and something terrible happened. So that catch up, if you will, of that public education that needs to happen around Lake George. We say, know it, avoid it, report it. Know what it is, avoid it, keep your pets out of it, don't swim in it, don't boat in it, but also then let us know. And that ordering in there is really important. So hopefully, and again, it's a very visual-based training, but hopefully that can be part of what happens with this group and with others going forward so that we can all be very aware of when these things are happening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go back to Joe. We skipped by the project actions review report because you weren't present at the time. If you'd like to do that, read that now, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Action Resolution 2020-45, accept project review actions report. Whereas the commission has received and reviewed the project review action report prepared by the staff and dated 11/17/2020. Whereas the project review committee recommends acceptance of the project review actions report. Now therefore be resolved that the commission directs that the project review actions report be incorporated in the minutes of the full commission meeting. So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the project review actions report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Dave, I guess this is Carla's turn. Carla, would you give us an update on the stream quarter and stormwater regulations?
Sure. I'm going to start with stormwater. As everyone knows, the proposed amendments to the stormwater regulations were published in the State Register on July 22nd. There is a 60-day period for public comment, and then the commission held its public hearing on September 22nd. As you may know, the initial comment period for these was supposed to expire on the 28th, but through conversations with the executive chamber down in Albany, and in order to provide for at least a 30-day overlap between the stormwater and the stream corridor, since originally they were together, and then we made the determination with Albany to split them into the different regulations, which made more sense statutorily. We extended the time period for the stormwater to end this coming Friday at 4 o'clock. So public comment is still being accepted on stormwater through this Friday at 4 o'clock. Staff has been working diligently this whole time, reading comments, preparing draft responses to questions so that they can be presented after the formal comment period ends. So that's really where we are with stormwater. Stormwater at this point is almost parallel, in a parallel route to the stream corridor. The stream corridor regulations, they were published at the end of October. The public hearing for stream corridor regulations is scheduled for January 12th of next year at 4 o'clock at Fort William Henry. We're in the public comment period right now. We have received some public comments and are reviewing them. The public comment period for that regulation will expire on January 18th. So folks have until the 18th of January to provide comments on the stream corridor part. Similar to stormwater, the commission and staff is going to look through all of the stream corridor comments and their questions, look through it, prepare the formal responses. The way the calendar is looking right now, at the February meeting, the commission is going to look at both the stream corridor and the stream corridor and the stormwater corridor. They're going to discuss it. And at the, my understanding at this point is at the February meeting, they'll adopt it, submit everything with the notice of adoption, with any changes to the state register. And the hope is that both sets of regulations will become effective as of April 1st. So before next year's real season, we'll have the stormwater regulation amendments and the stream corridor regulations in place and effective. And we will be working with the local municipalities and we have been in drafting, helping them draft their local laws so that they can mirror and work in concert with the park commissions. So we're moving along. It's been a long process. There's a lot of moving parts, but we are moving along forward. The public has been great in giving comments and staff has been responding to those comments, and we'll come out with a formal response after the comment period. I know that's a lot of information. It's a lot of real detailed information, but I thought it was important for the public to understand what's happening behind the scenes at this point. All of these dates are statutory, so we are moving forward under SAPA and under the statutes. I am happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, or if Dave or Joe Thuin, who have been extremely instrumental in these regulations, want to pop in, I would invite them to do so as well.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Thank you, Carla.
Sure.
Dave, how about an update on the Milfoil?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to try to share my screen with you. Justin, I assume we're all squared away and set up for this?
Yep, you are a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
All right. So, okay. Okay, can everybody see the Milfoil picture? We good?
It's starting.
Let me know when we're good.
Sure.
You should see first slide. Nothing yet?
Nothing yet. It just says Dave Wick has started screen sharing, but I don't see the presentation.
Let me see if there's something I need to do
there it
still.
is.
What's that?
There it is. I saw it. It just came up.
We back up?
There you go. You're good.
Okay, great. So I have about 20 slides. We do this once a year to kind of bring everybody up to speed where we are on our Eurasian Water Milfoil program. This was the largest milfoil program, I believe, in the history of the commission, working with our partners and some grant money that we're going to talk about. So we've had some pretty good outcomes this year. I just want to highlight a little bit about where we are. So for the last few years, we've been using a process called diver-assisted suction harvesting, working with a company out of Manchester, Vermont. The idea is a person like this is Wes Sheldon on the bottom. He's down there for 3-4 hours, literally pulling the milfoil out by hand and putting it into a disposal tube. Then it comes out here on the top, and then they just rake the milfoil into buckets, and then we bring it for disposal. This year, with the resources that we had, we were fortunate enough to have 4 individual suction harvesters on Lake George full-time, plus 2 additional hand crews, which really allowed us to do work that we haven't been able to do in the past several years. So this is just a quick shot of Sunset Bay, what it was a few years ago. And as of now, we've really largely eliminated the milfoil in Sunset Bay, but this was a wall-to-wall milfoil for about 3 acres. So we'll go through it just a little bit. Right up front, everybody asked me about the money. What are we doing? Where's it coming from? We had $500,000 this year, which again, based on my research, is the largest number that we've ever had. This goes to thanks to the partnership that we have working with this. The Park Commission is in for $100,000 out of EPF money. The LGA, $100,000. The Fund for Lake George, $60,000, and then Warren County through a Department of State grant that Chris Belvin and I worked on a few years back, allows an additional amount of resources for 3 years to help us out. This year was the biggest of those years, and I can't say enough to Walt Lender and the LGA because they actually fronted not only their 100, but the additional county 240,000. So they put forward $340,000 this year, got 240 back. That was a pretty big ask, and we thank the LGA for that. So let's talk a little bit about what the idea was, what was the goal. So what we've been saying for a few years is we want to attack and address all known dense milfoil beds in Lake George and eliminate those hopefully for good. Next year will be the 3rd year of the 3-year program. Thanks to the grant, at that point the grant dollars will be expended. We are on track to achieve that goal. The vast majority of the remaining milfoil beds in Lake George have been addressed over the last couple of years pretty significantly. It is going to take, in the long term, this issue isn't going to go away. It's a huge lake and has quite a big littoral zone where milfoil can grow, and we do occasionally find new sites. So there's always going to be a need for additional work, but we are making some pretty good progress. This graph or this table is a lot to take in, but I just want you to get a few things out of it. The left table is 2019. You'll notice that the black are southern sites and the green are mid-lake sites. What you don't see in 2019 are the northern sites. There was a few considerable sites over there. What we had with the resources in 2020 was the ability to dedicate 1 harvesting crew and 1 suction harvester up to Hague, up to Putnam, and get some of these sites addressed. And we did, all but 1 site, which I'll talk about later. We did add on Dog Beach this year pretty significantly. And then these are all new sites that we worked on in 2020. So we still worked on the vast majority of the sites in 2019, knocking those numbers again way back. And we had the resources to address these additional sites in 2020, largely because the sites on the left didn't take nearly as long as they have in the past because of previous work that allowed us a fair amount of time to go into the remaining sites. Kind of on an overall aerial graphic scale, this is what we're looking at. On the left is 2019, and you'll see the furthest north that we went, Hewlett's Landing. If you look in 2020, all of the green sites are sites that we haven't hit in several years, and this allowed us to pull a considerable amount of additional milfoil out of some of the dense beds up there. I'll post this presentation to our website after the meeting, so if there's anything of interest to you, you can pull it out individually. What do we have left in terms of dense beds that we didn't hit in 2020? We really have 4. The largest by far is Glen Burnie up in Blair's Bay in the northern part of the lake. We discovered this summer for the first time a large, well, moderately large half-acre site, very dense, and we plan on removing that next year. The nice thing is there's not a lot of native growth around that site, so we think we can really hit that and largely get it eliminated. Green Harbor down in Lake George has been on the docket on and off for 25 plus years. It's very shallow, very dense, but it's very isolated from the lake also. Part of how we evaluate which sites we're going to hit is, are they a larger threat to broader Lake George? And Green Harbor really hasn't been. Then the village of Lake George has always been a challenge due to the fact that the sediments are very tight. The previous company we had was literally using garden tools to try to get the roots out of the sediments. Plus, it is just an absolute, it's chaos out there in the summertime with all the rental boats going in and out, and it's just a dangerous place to work. So that's a site that we haven't really taken a strong crack at for a while now. I just wanted to throw a few maps out. This is what we see. We get weekly reports from our milfoil provider. The red dots, of course, are where they've harvested the milfoil, so it gives you a pretty good handle on where we've been working. This Sawmill Bay site was just discovered last year. We'd always worked up around this area, about the Finkelbrook Delta. What we hadn't known, and what one good thing about the company that we work with, is they will not only work on that site, but they'll also go out and they'll swim the greater proximity to find out if there's any other areas. They found this very dense site. This was actually our largest removal patch this year. This is 20,000 pounds of milfoil just out of this one patch. By perspective, that patch is twice the size of everything they pulled out of Scroon Lake this year. Gull Bay was a site that we haven't hit in several years. There are 2 known dense beds here in Gull Bay, both of which were hit not once but twice this year by the northern crew. We expect that to hold up pretty well for next year. Harris Bay is an ongoing challenge for us. The amount of money and resources and time that's been spent in Harris Bay is unequaled in the Lake George program, and that's something that we're going to talk about. It's just a very big, broad bay, and milfoil crops up. It's pretty productive, crops up in different locations. We did more work in Harris Bay than any previous year, I believe, on record, and there's still work to be done. Kathy might like this. This is Eichlerville Bay. We hit Eichlerville Bay 2 times this year. This was a significantly dense known bed up through here with a little bit of stragglers coming in and out. We did remove that entire patch this year, and not once, but any resurgent milfoil that came back, that was removed again. So we expect that hopefully be down 80 to 90% next year when we go back. So what do we do with all the milfoil? We removed 175,000 pounds of milfoil. That is more than twice the amount of the previous 2 years. So in 18 and 19, they were both about 82,000 pounds each. This year we removed 175,000 pounds of milfoil. We thank the local highway departments for helping us get rid of this. They bring it to their local shops, their transfer stations, they bring it to local farms, which is very helpful. Roger and Justin are out there on at least once a week, twice a week, dumping these trailers because we're pulling quite a bit of milfoil out. We do go out there to check progress. We are the quality control on this, so we know a fair amount about each of the sites in Lake George. We thank our LGA partners for coming out and swimming with us, because it does take a decent amount of time, but we can swim upwards of 2 miles a day on shorelines. We can cover whole bays, and that helps the milfoil provider. We want them actually harvesting milfoil, not searching for milfoil, because these crews are not cheap. So as many volunteers as we can get on the boat, the better. This year, due to COVID, we really maxed out at 3 people per boat, as opposed to the traditional 5 or 6. We like to get out there to cover more ground. But we do spend a lot of time on quality control. Questions come up. So if you've only had an additional $60,000 this year, how did you double the amount of milfoil that you removed in this year? And the answer largely comes from the northern sites. So we haven't hit Gull Bay and Arcady Bay, Rogers in several years, and those sites really came back strongly and formed very dense beds. So you see that in some of the numbers in a graph in just a second. So we're very happy that we have the resources to keep 1 crew up north. This is probably the most important graph. We take all the data, ask Michelle to kind of tally it, and then I create a few graphs out of it. But the blue is 2020, the red is 2019. what we're looking for in general are things like Clay Island over here. So if you take a look, our 2020 numbers are much lower than a 2019. We're not seeing a big resurgence. You'll see that here in Sunset Bay. We took a lot of material out in 19, and then it grew back pretty strongly. And that's kind of reflected in this graph right here. I call it a tale of two sites. So Sunset Bay, huge amount of work, huge amount of resources went into that, and it came back in the range of about 60% of the population, as opposed to Clay Island over here, where a lot of work in 19 and very little was left in 2020. Why? Why is that the case? Sunset Bay, extremely dense vegetation throughout, a lot of natives, a lot of milfoil, and it's difficult to get all the fragments. The sediments are very soft and very deep, so it's hard to get all of the root mass out of there. Where Clay Island is almost solely a big milfoil patch, and they can go through it and then they can go re-through it, and they can simply clear that site out. So each site in Lake George is very different in terms of its composition, its substrate, and our ability to manage that. And why is that important? So areas that respond well to our harvesting, that only have, say, a 20 to 40% return rate, we think the program that we have in place is working very well, because each year, if we can remove 80%, after a few years, these sites will no longer be dense beds. And we've proven that in many of the sites in Lake George. Areas that we're seeing a strong regrowth, that would be Glen Burnie, that would be Sunset Bay, Northwest Bay, Harris Bay. Those are things that we want to take another look at and possibly have a conversation about all the tools in the toolbox, one of which is a new chemical, which is actually a plant growth hormone called Procelicor. So if you're into the world of milfoil control in New York State or the Adirondacks, Minerva Lake is where everybody's keeping an eye on. So Minerva Lake, the town, worked with the Adirondack Park Agency to get a permit to apply Procelicor, which is kind of the newest, shiniest kind of chemical treatment for aquatic nuisance plants, really in the country and in the world. And it seems to be an exceptionally good product at doing this with exceptionally low treatment rates. So again, this isn't a typical application contact herbicide. This is a plant growth hormone where the plant takes it up and it grows so fast it simply blows apart. I don't pretend to be, a plant growth expert, or certainly not an herbicide expert. So I spent quite a bit of time working and talking with Lee Walrath from the Adirondack Park Agency. That is the one that reviews and permits all of these activities. I had the fortune of going up and meeting with Lee Walrath, and we did a kayak tour of Minerva Lake with Aaron Benny Walrath, also of APIC. This was treated in the spring of the year. This is Minerva Lake, and the entire area of 41 acres was treated with only 8.7 gallons of this treatment. It goes in at 1.9 to 3.8 parts per billion, which is such an exceedingly low rate versus previous chemical applications anywhere in the world. The water detection limit on this, or the water contact limit, is 50 parts per billion, so is magnitudes less than that. And when we went out there 3 months later, this was ranging from sparse to moderate to dense throughout this whole part of the lake. Afterwards, part of the permit, Solitude, the company that applied, was required to go back and do 80 rake tosses to figure out what they could find. How was the treatment? They literally could not find one plant, nor was the native plant population affected. We went out about a month later trying to find milfoil ourselves on our own survey, could not find one plant itself. They did the whole job for $25,000. That is far less than we've spent just in one site this year at Sawmill Bay. So it's something that we want to have a conversation about. I asked Lee if he might be willing to come and talk to the commission at our April meeting. That's when he said he will have a better outcome information from the Solitude annual report. But it's something that we really want to take a look at. If we're doing this program, it's an obligation as a state agency to evaluate every possible tool that we have. And this seems to be something that we really want to take a look at to find out if there is merit in looking at this for Lake George. Different topic. My last slide is talking about some post-season work that we did with AE. So over the many years that the milfoil has been managed on Lake George, many years were spent putting milfoil mats down, which were very effective at the time, smothering the milfoil, and they can be relocated or removed. A lot of those mats, I've said, you've heard me say several times, there's always money to put mats in. There's not always money to take mats out. And so this year, thanks to a cost sharing between us and the Lake George Association, we removed just under an acre of plastic mats from the village of Lake George at 2 distinct sites, 140 mats, and Roger worked to get those disposed of properly. So that's good. That's less plastic garbage on the bottom of Lake George. So that is a very quick overview of the milfoil program in Lake George. I'd be more than happy to take any questions if you have them. So thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. That very good report.
Very nice.
Law enforcement, Kenny.
Yes, Chairman.
Can I ask a question, Bruce, please?
Go ahead.
Having first started in Sunset Bay and looking at the other sites, again, isn't there a direct correlation between nutrient load and milfoil growth? And it just brings us back to nutrient. We're just feeding all of these things in the lake by allowing septic systems to continue in the present state that they are in. Milfoil is like any other plant. If you fertilize it, it's going to proliferate. And I just see this whole meeting being totally affected by septic systems producing nutrients that feed everything that's bad about the lake. That's it. I don't see how all of these organizations spend all of this money, and one of the main nutrient loading sources is not approached by the DEC and by the Park Commission. Thank you.
Kenny?
Law Enforcement Committee meeting. We had a meeting this morning, 9:15. We discussed the Lieutenant's Marine report, which includes the patrol, which includes the fact that there's still officers available with a boat in the event of an emergency on the lake. We reviewed distributed the Marine Patrol annual report with a comparison. It's just an incident report of raw numbers as to this year versus last year. We went into executive session to discuss a couple of ongoing enforcement cases. We left executive session, and I have a resolution 2020-46, whereas the Law Enforcement Committee met via teleconference November 24th, 2020, to review matters pertaining to the Law Enforcement Park Commission's Marine Patrol and the Commission's law enforcement program. And whereas active law enforcement cases and their status were reviewed in executive session, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee has reported on the results of that committee meeting at this full commission meeting, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee recommends acceptance of this month's law enforcement report, now therefore be it resolved that the commission accepts the report of the Law Enforcement Committee, and I make that as a motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the Law Enforcement Committee report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We've now reached public comments portion. Actually, we've had a lot of public comments already, but we have it on the agenda. If there are any more public comments, now is the time to make them.
All right.
And that,
Would anyone like to make a public comment?
I'm sorry?
Bruce, I'm just asking if anyone would like to make a public comment. And I know
Yeah.
quite a few of our members of the public are muted, so I'm just giving them an opportunity to unmute themselves and speak.
Well, for once, most of the public comments were made during the meeting. So I'll ask for adjournment at this time.
Move to adjourn.
Motion?
Then move-
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Stay safe,
Happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanks, Bruce. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye, all.